It was supposed to be a regular afternoon. A black woman, just minding her business, walked into a car outside a quiet suburban grocery store. But what happened next would shake the whole neighborhood and leave everyone stunned. Out of nowhere, a policewoman pulls up, slams her door, and with her hand trembling, draws her weapon, aimed straight at the woman. No warning, no explanation, just fear, tension, and confusion filling the air. People start gathering, phones come out, and voices rise. The black woman, visibly confused and scared, keeps her hands up, trying to stay calm. She asks, "What did I do?" But there's no clear answer, just a panicked officer who seems more nervous with every passing second. Then, like a twist in a movie, a black SUV rolls up. Out steps the sheriff, and when he sees what's happening, everything changes. The energy shifts. The sheriff walks straight toward the scene. What he does next stops everyone in their tracks. The officer's face goes pale, her hands shake more, and the entire situation flips in a way no one could have seen coming. Who is this black woman? Why did the sheriff act the way he did? And what made the officer panic like that? What happened after will leave you speechless. Stay tuned. The sheriff didn't say a word at first. He just stood there, looking at the scene, at the officer holding the gun, and the woman standing frozen with her hands still in the air. You could feel how heavy the silence was. People watching didn't even breathe. Then slowly, the sheriff walked over to the black woman, not the officer, and asked if she was okay. That's when you knew something deeper was going on. The officer, still holding her weapon, looked confused, almost scared. She lowered it just a bit, like she suddenly realized the eyes on her weren't full of support. They were full of judgment, of disbelief. The sheriff turned his head slowly, looked at her, and said her name. Just that. Quiet but firm. That was all it took. Her hand dropped. Her lips trembled. Turns out, the black woman wasn't just anyone. She was someone the sheriff knew, someone respected in the community. A youth mentor, a speaker, a local hero in her own right, and the officer, brand new to the area. No idea who she had just pulled a gun on. No real reason, no call, no report, just a suspicious person she thought looked out of place. But why? What made her react like that? And what did the sheriff say next that made her step back in shock? The sheriff looked the officer dead in the eye, and what he said wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a knife. "Do you even know who she is?" The officer didn't answer. She looked like she wanted to disappear. People around started whispering, some recording every second. The black woman, still shaken, was silent too, but her eyes said everything. Hurt, confusion, maybe even anger. Not because she was afraid, but because she was tired. Tired of moments like this. The sheriff turned back to her, gently lowered her hands, and offered her a quiet apology. Not just for what happened, but for what it represented. This wasn't the first time she'd been profiled, and sadly she knew it wouldn't be the last. But this time was different, because it played out in front of witnesses, because it involved an officer who panicked at first glance, and a community figure who deserved so much better. Then, another layer unfolded. One of the bystanders, a young girl, maybe 17, spoke up. "She helped my brother get off the streets. That's Miss Tanya." Her voice cracked. "She saved him." The officer flinched when she heard that name. Tanya, it clicked. But how did she recognize it? What secret was buried under her reaction? And why did her hands start to shake even more when the sheriff asked, "Where'd you transfer from again?" The officer hesitated, her eyes darting between the sheriff and Miss Tanya. Her mouth opened like she was about to speak, but no words came out. The sheriff stepped closer, voice low but serious. "I asked you a question," he said again. "Where did you transfer from?" She finally muttered a town name, quiet, barely audible. But Tanya heard it, and her expression changed instantly. She took a small step back, as if she'd just been hit with a memory she didn't expect. The tension snapped tighter. A few people in the crowd noticed too. The name meant something. Tanya stared at the officer, her voice calm but sharp. "You were there, weren't you?" No one knew what she meant yet, but the sheriff did. His eyes narrowed, like a puzzle piece had just locked into place. The crowd leaned in, phones still up. Silence again, but not empty. This silence was heavy, almost electric. The officer looked like she was unraveling right in front of them. Her hand moved toward her holster, not to draw, but almost like instinct, like muscle memory. The sheriff noticed, and calmly reached out, resting his hand near hers without force, just presence. "You were part of that stop," Tanya said. "That night. The traffic stop that went wrong." The sheriff looked at the officer one more time. "Is that true?" he asked, and this time, the whole street waited for her answer. The officer didn't answer. She just stood there frozen, lips slightly parted like she wanted to deny it, but couldn't. Tanya stepped forward now. Slowly, her voice steady but colder than before. "That stop, my nephew didn't walk away from it. And you," her eyes locked onto the officer's, "you were in the passenger seat." Gasps broke out in the crowd. The tension that had been simmering now surged like a wave crushing down. The sheriff took a step back, piecing it all together. This wasn't just about racial profiling anymore. This was history. Pain. Consequences that had followed both women to this moment, in broad daylight, in front of a growing crowd. The officer's eyes welled up, not from guilt, more like fear. And then came the twist no one saw coming. One of the bystanders, a man in plain clothes, pushed through the crowd, flashing a badge. Off-duty internal affairs. He looked at the sheriff, then at the officer, and said something that shifted the entire energy. "We've been looking for her." Whispers spread like wildfire. Tanya's eyes narrowed. The sheriff's face darkened. The officer didn't say a word, just stood, eyes wide, exposed. Now this wasn't just about a traffic stop gone wrong. It wasn't just about fear or profiling. Something bigger was unfolding, and the truth, it wasn't done revealing itself yet. The sheriff turned sharply to the internal affairs officer. "What do you mean, looking for her?" The man pulled out a file from his coat, flipping it open. She left her last apartment under investigation. Suppressed body cam footage. There were questions about use of force, about lying on reports. Then she transferred here before the review board could finish. The crowd went dead silent. Even the wind felt still. Tanya didn't flinch. Her voice was calm. "That night," she said, "my nephew reached for something. But I knew. Knew he didn't." Her hands curled into fists, not out of anger, but out of release. The truth was finally surfacing, and not just for her. The sheriff's jaw tightened. Why wasn't this flagged in her transfer? The internal affairs officer shook his head. "Someone buried it. We only found it after another complaint came through, just last week. And then came the twist. It wasn't from Tanya. It was from another officer. Someone she threatened to keep quiet." The officer finally broke her silence. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she whispered. "I panicked." Tears streamed down her face now, but it didn't undo what had been done. The sheriff turned to Tanya, not with pity, but respect. "You were right to stand tall, and you're not standing alone." Tanya nodded, but just as the officer was about to be escorted away, she turned to Tanya with one last sentence. "There's more, and I wasn't the only one." The words hit like thunder. The case wasn't over. It had just cracked wide open.